So now you know some basics about different kinds of synthesis types. The next thing will be, how do you start creating your own sounds? How do you start sound designing? Now I know every person is different, but the way I learned things is just by diving into it and start playing around and start tweaking it. Now besides making music and sound designing, I also love to do 3D modeling and 3D stuff. I love to edit movies. I love to do even program my own games. Now all of this I learned it in the same way. Just start by nothing and do my own research and play with it every day. Now sometimes you will get stuck and you will get frustrated because you don't have the results you want. At those moments you can just search for a tutorial and find your way out. Now I only searched for help only when I needed it. I think practice is still the best way to learn things. Now learning how to use a synthesizer can be overwhelming. When you first start designing your own sounds, you can get confused with the dozens of parameters a synth has. But there are 5 main components that every synthesizer has. Now once you understand these components, you will find your way to sculpt your sound. Now every component has a specific role in the sound designing process. And when you understand these roles, you find your way to create the sounds you hear in your head. So the 5 components are as following. The first one is the oscillator. The second one is the filters. The third one will be the envelope section. The fourth one is the LFO, or so-called low frequency oscillators. And the last one is the effects section. So let's start with the first component, the oscillator. Now this is the main component of your synth. This is where you generate your tones. Usually you can choose between different waveforms like sine waves, saw waves, pulse, triangle. Of course, it depends on what kind of synthesizer you have. Now the second one is the filter section. Every synthesizer has a filter section. Usually you can choose between filter types like low pass, band pass, high pass. Now with a filter, you're able to control the harmonic content of your sound. Or in other words, you can make your sound brighter or darker. Now the third component is the envelope section, or ADSR, attack, decay, sustain and release. With the envelopes you can modulate your volume, your filter, pitch and many more. So the fourth component will be the LFO, as its name implies low frequency oscillator. Now the frequency range of this oscillator is much lower than we can hear, but it doesn't really matter because you use this oscillator to modulate different components of the synthesizer. For example, you can use it to modulate the pitch, that will be a vibrato effect, or you can use it to modulate a volume, that will be the tremolo effect, or use it on a filter to modulate the sound's timbre. So the last component is the effects section. Now usually synthesizers have effects like a delay, a reverb, a chorus to finish your sounds. But nowadays VST plugins and synthesizers have a huge list of cool effects. So now you understand the 5 components of a synthesizer. You're kind of ready to start designing your own sounds. Now getting familiar with your parameters of your synth is only a way of practice. So the first step will be to identify the components in your synth. Now, every synthesizer is different and there are many synthesizers out there, but they all use the same 5 components. So the best way to learn a synthesizer sometimes is just to reverse engineer a factory preset. Or you can start by an initialized preset. You will quickly notice how every parameter affects the sound. Now, creating sounds from scratch may not be necessary yet, but tweaking a preset is a good way to start. And it's also a good idea to start with only one synthesizer in the beginning, because all the synths are capable of doing the same stuff, but the way of achieving these results can be different. So the next thing I want to talk about with you is my own VST synth called Genesis Pro. As I told you before, I've worked on this for the last 8, maybe 9 years, and the first version of the Genesis was released back in 2011, I guess. It was a free VST. It got released with Computer Music Magazine. And then I decided to work on the second version, the Pro version. Only I had so many ideas and so many features I wanted to build in the synth that it costed me about 8 years. So finally, I released it last year in February. So you have to know that everything I know about sound designing and synthesis forms, everything I learned in SynthEdit. And if you're a sound nerd like me, you should definitely check out SynthEdit. SynthEdit is a very cool program. It is a modular environment and it's visual programming. So you work with modules and you connect them with wires, and that's the way how you build your VST synth or your effect. Now, the cool thing is you can literally build anything with SynthEdit. I mean, your imagination is your own limit. And I have built many, many effects and synths, and I've got a lot of projects still got to be released this year. But like I said, if you're a sound nerd like me, you will definitely like it. And it's absolutely maybe the best way to learn about synthesis and sound designing. So in a bit, we will go back to my computer and I will show you how SynthEdit works. I will try to build a very simple synth using those 5 components again I was talking about earlier. I will also show you the project of Genesis so you will get an idea how complex a project of 8 years of work looks like. So let's get back to the computer and let's get started. So welcome to SynthEdit. As I told you before, SynthEdit is a modular environment and it's based on visually programming. So what are we going to do? We are going to build a very basic synthesizer, and based on those 5 components, what I was talking about earlier. And so you will have an idea of how a synth is constructed from the inside. You will have an idea how everything is connected with each other. So the first thing we need is a MIDI input. So with this, we will be able to receive MIDI signals. Now, the next thing we are going to add is a MIDI to CV. Now, what is a MIDI CV? A MIDI CV is a converter, a bridge that converts the MIDI message or the MIDI signals to control voltage. And we need those signals to control the envelope with the gate. We need the pitch signal to control the pitch of the oscillator. You can control the velocity, the aftertouch. So let's connect the MIDI input. Let's enable Snap to Grid. Okay, so the next thing we're going to add is the first component, and that will be our oscillator. So here we got a oscillator, and this is a very basic oscillator. It has a sine, a saw, a ramp, triangle, pulse, white noise, and a pink noise. So the first thing we are going to do is connect the pitch from the MIDI converter to the oscillator. So we can control the pitch of the oscillator with our keyboard. Let's add a list entry so we can control the waveforms. Make some space. So as you can see, we have a switch here, basic switch where we can control the waveforms of the oscillator. So the next thing we will need is a ADSR, or an envelope generator. Now, as you can see, we have a trigger, a gate, attack, decay, sustain, relays, and an overall level input. As you can guess, we need to connect the trigger from the MIDI CV to the envelope generator. and the gate also. Now the oscillator has also some inputs: a pulse width input, a sync input, a phase mod, a PM depth, and with these two inputs you can create the FM synthesis. But that's not what we're going to do here. We're going to create a simple synth today. Okay, so the next thing we are going to add is the third component, that will be a filter. And we're going to add a simple filter, a state variable filter. Now, this is a very basic filter that has a low pass, a band pass, a high pass filter types built into it. So the oscillator output goes into the filter input. Like this. Now we need a slider or a knob to control the parameters. Oh, now let's connect this to the filter pitch. Now in SynthEdit it's called pitch, but you better know that as cutoff. And here we got the resonance. So let's rename this into cutoff. So we have a filter with a cutoff parameter. Now the next thing we are going to add is a VCA, or a amplifier, where we can control the volume of the oscillator, and we can control the envelope also. So the next thing we're going to do is connect the output from the filter to the amplifier and connect the envelope output to the volume input of the amplifier. So now we have the audio input coming in the amplifier, and with the ADSR we can control the envelope. So let me add some sliders to control the envelope as well. This is going to be the attack. Let's copy, paste. This is going to be the decay. This is going to be the sustain. The release, and the overall level, or the volume. Now, if I'm correct, if we turn on the synthesizer, we will have a basic synth with basic envelope controls and with a basic filter. Let's see if it works. And it works. So this is the cutoff. With this we can control the envelope. And here we can change the waveform. Let me put down the volume a little bit. So this is a very basic synth, but we still need to add two components. The next thing we are going to add is a LFO, a low frequency oscillator. Now the LFO is basically the same as a normal oscillator. The only thing that is different is the frequency range is going to be much lower. So what we want to do is create a switch so we can control the output of the LFO. We can choose what to modulate. We need a level adjust so we can adjust the amount of the LFO. Let's connect this here. So the first modulation target is the pitch of the oscillator. The second is going to be the cutoff of the filter. And the last one is going to be our volume. So now we have let's change the frequency scale of the LFO. And copy another slider, paste, connect this to the frequency. Let's make this 0.1. So it's a very low frequency oscillator. Let's have another knob slider for the amount. Let's make this 0.1 also. Okay, if I'm correct, let's add another switch and change its name. So this is going to be pitch, second one is going to be cutoff, and the third one is going to be volume. So now we have added the fourth component, and that is the LFO. We have added a switch where we can select the target to modulate with the LFO, and we have the LFO amount and the LFO speed. Let's see what is going to happen. Okay, so we need another switch to select the waveform of the LFO. So as you can hear, we have built a very basic synth. So now you have a little bit of idea how a synth works and how you build a synth. Basically, a hardware synths are built in the same way, only this is a digital version of it. But as I told you before, this is a great way to learn not only about sound designing, but how a synth is constructed and how it looks from the inside. And you will learn how to actually manipulate sound. And as you can see, it is really fun to play around with it. You know, it's like Lego. You can build whatever you want, actually. You know, you can do crazy combinations and try crazy stuff. I mean, like I said before, your own imagination is the limit right here. So we're only missing the last component. That's the effect component. I'm not going to add that right here. But yeah, I really recommend downloading SynthEdit and just have a play with it. And it will help you absolutely with your process of learning about sound designing and all kinds of synthesis forms. Now, the last thing I want to show you is how the Genesis Pro project looks like. As you know, we just built a very basic synth, and it was made with a couple of modules and a couple of wires. Now I'm going to show you how the Genesis Pro looks like, and I can tell you, you can hold your breath because probably you will be shocked. Now, keep in mind that this is a project of 8 years of work. And as you can see, that's a lot of wires. Now, I know it looks very, very crazy, but this is how it looks like. I mean, Genesis Pro is a very complete synth. So I built every function, every feature I had in my mind. And as you can see, all those containers, you can go in each container and you will get another screen full of modules and wires. And now it looks like a big mess because this version of SynthEdit is an older version, and it has some downsides. This is also the reason I couldn't make it 64-bit, because the hugeness of this project, and I couldn't port it to the newer version. But this older version didn't have the feature to snap the wires to the grid. But even if that was possible, it would still be a big spider web. So yeah, this is how a synth looks like from the other side. And I don't know, if I had to make a guess, maybe it's like thousands of wires. And at some point I started just with one module, like I showed you today in the example. I started with one module, and then I kept on building, and this is how it looks like after 8 years. Now you can imagine that I've learned a lot while I was building the Genesis. Now that is how the Genesis Pro looks like from the inside. You have an idea now how a synthesizer is constructed and how things are connected with each other, how the components work. So we have talked about sound designing and some ways to learn it. We have talked about different kinds of synthesis forms and how they work. So I don't know how experienced you are, but if you just get into sound designing, the best way to learn this is just to grab a synth you like and start playing around with it. Along the way, you will learn all those aspects of sound designing. And if you want to go a step further, then download a program like SynthEdit or something similar. You have also Flowstone Synth Maker, which is also a modular environment, and it is also based on visual programming. But a program like that will help you go way beyond sound designing. You will actually learn how a synthesizer works from the inside and how all those components are interacting with each other. So sound designing is a very essential aspect for a producer. It will help you to create your own sound. It will help you to recreate the sounds you have in your mind. And with that, you can create more original music. And like I said before, with sound designing, you're able to create your own signature sound. And because of that, you will stand out as an artist. So I hope you all learned a lot of this video. Most of all, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I want to thank you all for joining me and hope you guys stay safe. Bye-bye.